Hello, my name is David Hitchin. I'm a Principal Independent Consultant at Target Conforms Limited. And I've got a half an hour presentation here titled Integrated Management Systems, Asset Systems Management, BIM and Collaborative Working. And I'm going to concentrate on how these professions can work together more effectively with some key considerations for SMEs. The presentation is in two parts. The first part, I'll quickly go through the history of management systems and formalisation of standards and integrated management systems. Then I'll have three asides talking about asset systems management, collaborative business relationships and building information management. Then I spend a little bit more time on the second part, which is the approach to integration of these three areas with particular focus for small and medium enterprises. Firstly, I'll look at a strategy for integration, then how operations can be delivered, and then look at opportunities for validation. I'd just like to remind ourselves of some basic management system principles using this diagram from Edward Deming. Improvement, specifically quality improvement in an organisation, can be seen as a journey following a virtuous cycle of plan, do, check, act. Going through the plan, do, check, act cycle and consolidating an organisation's processes generates new internal standards of behaviour, and if this is driven in the right way, it will drive improvement historically of quality, but this philosophy of plan, do, check, act can be used to drive any objective improvement, for example environmental improvement or occupational health and safety, business continuity, etc. Deming is famous for a number of quotes, and I particularly like this one. If you can't describe what you're doing as a process, then you don't know what you're doing. And process philosophy is crucial in successful management systems. If we take a few moments to talk about management system standards, specifically the recent harmonised standards following the ISO high-level structure, then we can see that the plan, do, check, act philosophy is the basis of the clause structure of these standards. So the planning activity within an organisation is covered by clauses 4, 5, 6 and 7, which cover the context or perspective that an organisation operates within, its requirements for governance and leadership, the link to risk and opportunity management and how objectives are driven, and all the support activity. The second quadrant, do, covers the operational controls that service the plan aims. Checking covers quadrant 3, and check-in is phrased as measurement under clause 9. And finally, act, which is the improvement activity, the acting on the processes, is covered in clause 10. I'd like to move on now to integration of management system standards and a little bit of history. So historically, the development of quality standards followed this route with the publication of BS 5750 and then a number of revisions of ISO 9001 from 1987 through to the high-level structure-based standard ISO 9001 2015. In parallel, following the publication of BS 7750, the environmental British standard, the international standard ISO 14001 was published in 1996 and then developed and revised through to the harmonised standard ISO 14001:2015. And thirdly, the OSAS Occupational Health and Safety Standard 18001 was published in 1999 and revised in 2007. At this time, the recognition of having a harmonised structure for management system and management system standards was recognised with the publication of PAS 99, Public Available Specification 99 in 2006. And this attempted to reduce the amount of duplication and have common understanding over these three popular standards, ISO 9001:2008, 14001:2004 and OSAS 18001:2007. But because the three standards grew up from different stables, there was further opportunity to harmonise the way that the standards worked to make it easier for practitioners to have an integrated management system that met all three requirements. And this evolved through the adoption of this high-level structure published in 2012 with the publication of PAS 99 2012, and then the further publication of ISO 9001:2015, ISO 14001:2015, and finally ISO 45001:2018 that have the same clause structure which we talked about earlier. So, asset management, BIM, collaborative working, why bother with the integration of these three activities? If we look at the key interested parties or stakeholders in these areas, they overlap substantially. Primary asset owners, subcontractors, extended subcontractor chains, designers, architects, supply chain partners, asset operators, facilities management, regulators, and even neighbours have a common interest in the efficient and effective design of the built environment, implementation of civil works, and running the resulting assets. And this can be seen as being lubricated, or the relationships between the parties being lubricated and facilitated through formal collaborative relationships. So we'll look now at a couple of further asides. If we just summarise asset systems management, the purpose of asset systems management is to drive value over the whole system life. So utility, the right costs. And this profession has evolved specifically through maturing of civil engineering, reliability engineering, new modelling techniques, but importantly the inclusion of finance management and an extra degree of freedom of using financial tools to optimise the asset utility from the cost structures and the cost flows available. There's development of a formal asset systems management standard in 2008 with the publication of PAS 55, and this was integrated into the high-level structure that we've talked about earlier through the publication of ISO 55001:2014. If we now move on to collaborative business relationship, one of the first things to recognise in any business collaboration is whether value can be identified and realised with the extra effort put into formal collaboration. Clearly, If the answer is no, then a more conventional transactional relationship is preferred. But often in extended supply chains, formal collaboration can result in extra value and extra activity to each organisation's benefit that cannot at all be realised in conventional transactional relationships. Practical development of collaborative business relationships has developed over the past couple of decades, and formal development through craft principles, that's collaboration, relationship, assessment, fulfillment and transformation, is formally recognised in the PAS 11000 Part 1 2006. This was revised to a British standard, BS 11000 2010, and has been subject to further high-level structure harmonisation with the publication of ISO 44001 2017. The final side I'd like to talk about is building information management and the organisation digitisation of engineering works and modelling information, which is not a management system standard in the sense of the high-level structure standards I've talked about earlier in this presentation, rather a set of rules for the efficient and accurate transfer of information from different parties. It's in a number of parts. Recently published current standard for the delivery of assets is ISO 19650 Part 2 2018, and there is an anticipated and planned standard for the operating phase of assets, ISO 19650 Part 3. Again, historically, these have started with public available specifications. So the question we can ask ourselves is, can we integrate these evolving good practice or best practices between the three professions in asset systems management, building information management and collaborative working? And what would the resulting integration look like? So, integration strategy, what would looking at the different professions and the different standards and their shapes of how they operate help us in formulating a way of integration. So, asset systems management operates generally at the strategic level. So, the optimization of value from an asset system is generally as a result of strategic decisions in the investment, the capex and opex activity, which is then implemented in a compliance sense. So asset systems management operates at the strategic level within an organisation. The building information management, though it may be considered as operating or can be used as a strategic decision, the operation as defined in these standards is an operational activity, information exchange activity at the operational scale. Collaborative business systems operates both at a strategic level between organisations and has operational elements that act at the interfaces between organisations. So the main impact of these three professions act at different places within an organisation, and it can be summarised in a diagram like this. So asset management in the strategy and middle management, BIM acting upon the operations, and collaborative business at the interfaces. Now if we look and analyse governance and operations with the three standards, the asset management standard ISO 55001 codifies the senior top management activity and strategy through the high level structure clauses 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 and 10, as was discussed earlier, and the requirement to have a strategic asset management plan. And these are directed by top management, enabled by middle management, and operated through clause 8. Building information management is coded through clauses 5.1 to 5.8 and defines activities that operate on the operations scale of an organisation. And finally, the collaborative business relationship management standard ISO 44001, like the 55001, the governance and top management activity is covered specifically in clauses 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, part of 9 and 10. It's enabled through a specific role, senior executives responsible, SERs, and the joint operations are exercised through clauses 8.6 to 8.9 in the standard. Now I have another insight regarding strategic asset management planning, so don't be alarmed at this slightly wordy slide. The first thing to recognise is a strategic asset management plan is a device for turning organisational objectives, so an organisation's finance or service level, health and safety, quality, CSR, top level objectives, into a number of things. One, to shape the process controls, so shaping the asset management system itself. It converts the organisational objectives into asset management objectives, which are more straightforward for engineering professions to deal with and meet and address their resources to meet. And asset management plans, so frameworks for managing assets through their whole life. And this requires a number of inputs and tools. So we mentioned earlier finance tools, so having managed cash flow or lease purchase or loan arrangements to release funds to have timely capex or operational expenditure throughout the life of a asset system. Having engineering tools, so I go back to design tools, so including ISO 19650 Part 2 for the design of the built environment, and the construction and operation of the built environment. So this relies specifically on emerging best practice in reliability engineering, and I've summarised a number of requirements in here: asset identification, asset condition, asset performance, monitoring requirements, facilities management modelling, asset criticality, repair, replacement, obsolescence, disposal and recycling. These all contribute to the optimization model for asset systems, and these need to work together to formulate a cohesive approaches and strategy for operating the asset management system, to define what needs to be measured, what needs to be controlled, what needs to be monitored, and what objectives, what asset management objectives are established, and what plans are put in place to realise those objectives. The second insight is to look at what I've called lean collaboration, which is the core collaboration tenets which are defined in the standard ISO 44001 and represent good recognised practice at operational level between organisations. So the large shape cover collaborative operations, and this generally depends on having a senior executive responsible, an SER. So the SER is involved with the engagement and negotiation strategy, almost inevitably with the financial commercial people, and also the resulting agreements and contracting arrangements. The delivery of joint operations is defined in a joint relationship management plan, a JRMP, and this has some key success factors connected with it, which are requirements of the ISO standard. So having a defined joint capability and operating environment, a joint risk management process, joint operational leadership, joint contracting arrangements which are migrated into the JRMP as a basis of the relationship, joint delivery and performance measures, joint management arrangements, joint knowledge management, so there's only one version of the truth, joint communication strategy to interested parties outside the partnership, a joint issue resolution process, which is generally to resolve issues at the lowest level as possible, and indeed a joint exit strategy and business continuity to allow a successful decoupling and leave the relationship to be potentially re-established in a future project. Now I've set it out like this really to incorporate the next stage. So analysing the operational links in the ISO 19600 Part 2 covering business information management lays out like this. So there's a number of systematic requirements: assessment of need, invitation to tender, tender response, appointment, mobilisation, collaborative production of information, information model delivery, and process closeout. Now these have specific defined framework within the standard. However, for the collaborations between interested parties to work effectively, it might be considered to have these stages within the collaborations. So the invitation to tender is a requirement within the collaborative standard, and so these processes can be dovetailed into each other, and the emergence of a common work environment to progress the building information management should prove an effective process for BIM management. If we add the previous aside on asset management, as asset systems management looks at the overall asset life, clearly it has a larger horizon, and therefore the asset requirements, the asset system requirements in the strategic asset management plan should be the starting place for defining whether there's an assessment and need for business information management as part of the overall strategy of an organisation. And finally, for completeness, I've put an area of governance here which exists within the asset management and the collaborative business relationship standards. So the context, stakeholder considerations and scope, leadership and policy, management structures, risk and opportunity, and objective management, the people, communications, environment and infrastructure support, measures, audit, management review, and improvement, correction and corrective action activity at the top management layer defines an overall framework under 44,001 and 55,001, which links into the activity like this. So in summary, establish leading practices for integrated asset systems management, business information management and collaborative business relationship management systems is reflected in conformity to these three standards, ISO 55001, 19650 and ISO 44001 respectively. The development of management systems and controls that conform to these three standards can be seen as a bureaucratic burden without obvious or immediate added value, particularly for SMEs. This presentation analyses the key elements and terminology of the three standards to present their interaction in an effective way, specifically for small and medium enterprises, but also as a reminder to corporates. This foundation can be used by organisations to develop management systems that are fully compliant with the relevant standards, and maybe at a future date as the corporate and governance activity are retrofitted, if you will. This approach can be used to integrate the proposed 19650 Part 3 to establish an effective operations or facilities management of assets in the future. Thank you for your time and attention.